Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second workshop on closing the loop. I am Jane Cherry from the Cooperative and Policy Alternative Centre, and we are an active partner in the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign. And together we're bringing you this workshop series on setting up your household food garden, but then also furthering that to looking at how we can close the loop in our gardens. This is all in an attempt to deepen food sovereignty pathways in South Africa. The first series looked at how to set up your household food garden, and I will share all these links with you when I'm done speaking, but we have recorded all of them. They're all on YouTube, and if you missed those, you can go back and watch those. And yeah, so I'm just going to start with a brief introduction to the series for those of you who weren't with us last time, and then I'm going to hand over to John. So this series is broken up into 4 themes. Last week we looked at setting up a food forest, but then also some principles about land management. Today we're looking at water management in your food garden. We're going to have a break next week, but then following that we will look at waste management in your garden, and then the final week of this series we'll look at seed saving and indigenous seeds. Today's program is going to start off with an input from John Nzira on water management in your food garden, and then after that we will have Ferial Adam, who's going to introduce us to another activist guide that we've developed. This one is on water sovereignty and water justice. And as with the land guide, our hope is that you will start looking beyond your own gardens if you aren't already, and needs to the water needs of others, of those in your community, and how we can go about ensuring that everyone has access to water. And so our hope is that by the end of this series, you'll have enough information to reduce inputs into your food garden by recycling, by reusing, redirecting what you have in your garden, that you will increase biodiversity and increase the yield of nutritious food for you and your family and community, and then also share this knowledge with others. And we also hope that you will contribute to the food commons. So we've set up a food commons map on the SAFC website, and I'll also share the link with you. And there we really encourage you, if you have a small scale farm, if you have a household food garden, if you have a soup kitchen, anything that falls into the food commons category, please list that on our map so that we can see what is out there and we can start to network and see how we can link up these initiatives, and then scale them up where it's possible. And then just some housekeeping, which I shared with you in the beginning. I'm going to share that again quickly. Please use the chat if you have any questions. All our workshops are being recorded. We have set up an advice panel, so if you have any questions or you think you'll have questions, please send me a message and I'll be able to share the contacts of that advice panel. And then just a reminder to please follow COVID safety guidelines on your farms. Okay, I'm just going to share all those links quickly that I mentioned before I forget. Courtney's not with us today, so I'm just sharing these in the chat. Okay, so this is the link to the recordings, to last week's recording, and then the food commons map. Okay, so we have pre-recorded John, as we have done with all our other workshops. I'm going to play his input. It's about 18 minutes, and then after that we will get Ferial. And then, as I said, if you have any questions along the way, please do write them in the chat, and we will have a question and answer session at the end.
Good afternoon.
Just to mention, John, yesterday he was in Soweto, and so it's quite noisy, but we did listen to it and we're happy with the recording. It is possible to listen past the noise, so please bear with us. Okay, I'll proceed.
Today we are going to talk about water harvesting in our gardens. It is more about looking at collecting water or taking water into the project or managing water in our small gardens in township or even in rural area. But the whole idea is about water conservation, harvesting water, and taking care of water so that we don't waste water. As we all know, water is a crisis in Africa. We do not have enough water for our gardens, for drinking, for use, domestic use, and even for watering our gardens. Most gardens, they get stressed, or plants, they get stressed because we don't get enough water to irrigate them. So hence, we need to conserve water. We need to make sure that water is conserved and water is taken care of. Wherever we have a drop of water, we need to take care of water. But basically, I want to share with you that the entry point for water management is understanding the ecological cycles. Most cases, we take for granted that ecological cycles are happening somewhere there. But ecological cycles need to be managed wherever you are. In a household situation, at your home, wherever you are, we need to manage ecological cycles. One ecological cycle is water cycle. The water cycle, if it's not managed, if you do not understand, you can otherwise leave water run from the surface into the ocean. And then at the end of the day, you suffer, do not have water. If water cycle is not managed well, it compromises the effective rainwater in an area. Because, for example, if you remove all the trees, you do not have effective water cycle. So water cycle needs to be managed within your farm, your household, your garden. Manage, check if the water is going into the ground. This water cycle, it will enhance the nitrogen cycle. It will also enhance the carbon cycle effectively. It also enhances oxygen cycle and the photosynthesis processes, the manufacturing of food, plant food within the leaves. It also enhances the energy cycle, the food chain. But when we are looking on these areas, we need to know the daily and the seasonal cycles. When do we receive rain? When do we receive precipitation? And when you receive this, how do you manage it? We need to look at the polycultures. How do we emphasize or promote the biodiversity in our farming area? So that once we have biodiversity, it promotes a good water cycle in the area. And then you do not have the challenge of water in your garden. This will help you either to, if you are managing it in the right way, it will help you to water the garden once a week. If you do not manage it well, you can even water the garden twice or 3 times a week or 4 times a week because you are not managing runoff water. So when we are talking about this effective water cycle and water management, we need to look at basically on what happens with the runoff water from your garden, from your house, from your farm. What happens with the water? Usually look at a school, water from the roof of a building. In this side, you see, from the building, water runs into the ground and run away. And these children, they are collecting water a kilometer away and uphill to bring water to the building. But instead, they could have a water tank here that catch all the water in the gutter, that catch all the water from here into a tank and store it and use it for future use. It can be also look at the question of when you see silt in the rivers, along the river, and when you see pools are closed, where is this scent coming from? This scent is actually coming from our farms. It's actually coming from our villages, coming from our gardens. The topsoil is being eroded and it goes there. This is an indicator of poor management system in an area. And you can even see in the villages around there, that water that just run. It's mainly because deforestation has happened here and no trees. And further upriver, no trees, cutting down is indiscriminately done. Then soil is eroded, it comes into the river to the ocean. Then we are losing a lot of topsoil and we are losing a lot of water by this lack of management of water. But there is a way of retaining. We have a way of retaining these challenges we have here. This challenge can be reversed easy. We can reverse these challenges in a way that we can start to think and say, how can we go about conserving water? Then we have to go, when the water is raining, rain is coming through, observe what is happening with the water. Observe where is the water going? How is the water run on the landscape? Where is it managed? How is it managed? Where is it going? Then start at the highest point of managing the water, like go up. If it's a mountain, try to walk up to the mountain and see what is happening around there. If it's within your homestead, observe the rooftop. What is happening with the water when it's coming from the roof and pour onto the ground? Isn't it splashing the soil and take all the soil away and take the water runs away and you are left without water? Start small. Then when you think about water harvesting, start small. In a container, harvest the water, direct water into the garden and conserve them. I'm going to share with you those practices. Spread the water and infiltrate into the ground. We'll show you how to do some of them. Plan for an overflow. When you have a tank, water is overflowing, what do? Do you leave it running away or you need to create another tank? I'll show you some examples. Minimize on living and organic ground cover. So ground cover is very important in the way we do farming, because ground cover is the blanket of the soil, is the cloth of the soil. And when you have the cloth of the soil, even the water, when it reaches the ground, it is directed into the ground. And this is what is important in what we are talking about, that water should be directed into the ground. Minimize beneficial relationship and staking. Try to link different species together to create staking, to create a biodiversity system, or create a forest within a piece of land where you are, so that when water reaches that area, it is trapped and goes down into the ground. Reassess and feedback the system, whether the system is working or not. Work out how you can repair the system, how you can make the system effective. So by looking at this, we are saying cover is the most important thing that you can do. One, it is a promotion of health soil, but you are allowing water to go into the ground. For example, here you see my farm, water, when it comes here, you won't see water running on the surface, and the water is directed into the ground. This can be done in a commercial way or in a small scale farm. The right, and this one is called green manure cover crop, and it is a good method that you can use to cover your ground so that water goes in the ground. Even here, it's a small scale backyard garden. It's about designing in the right way. Do crop rotation in the right way. For example, here, the first stage here, it's crops has been removed. Maybe the ripe crop and then removed, and then the land is mulched and plant new crops. These are the crops that are staying a bit longer and they are covering the ground. So we are covering the horizontal space, and at the same time the vertical space is occupied. So when you receive water in this area, water is not going to run away. Water is going to be maintained in there and forced into the ground. These methods can be used at a smaller scale or at a larger scale. Your small old gardening or into a huge farm. So this is a process where we are looking at protecting water sources, and the water sources are more of looking at springs or looking at rivers. Plant trees along the river, trees along the, like here, the place that is my farm, then it has a spring here. So we plant, and the river is behind this. So here on top, we plant maize, but on the edges here, we make sure that water comes and filter through this before it goes to the river, and also before it goes to the spring. And before it goes to the spring, you are forcing the water to go into the ground. So protecting the springs is very important. If you have a tank, a water tank around your homestead, either you cover the top with a mesh or with a corrugated iron sheet or a roof so that water is not evaporating, or you do what you call floating islands that are sitting in the water tank, and then it protects the evaporation of water. Direct water into the plants, or by using swales, trenches, divergent drains. So if you create trenches, you see these ladies are digging a 50-meter wide trench and about 60 centimeters deep, and filled with organic matter, and water is channeled here, and water stagnates, and they are preparing to plant on the ridge here, and then the plants will benefit out of this. And also this grass is going to decompose into this trench, and then it feeds the whole area with water. Moisture is going to be maintained. Or you have a divergent drain or a swell that is between the plants, like you see here, orange there, but in between here there is a trench that we dug in on a swell. And then on the lower part of the swell, we plant fruit trees. The upper part, we plant fruit trees. The water comes in between, and it's stored here, and then it's spread in both sides, and then it irrigates these fruits. And then the water is not wasted. The water is conserved in the system. So this is a very important way of conserving water in an area. We have different methods as well. Saving, you can use pots like these ones in your garden. Let's say this is the soil, this one, the black one, and this is a container like a clay pot, but with a pipe at the bottom. The clay pot or unglazed clay pots, when you put water, they seep water out slowly in the soil, and then the plants around can have the benefit of collecting the water from the trench. Also, it can be just like a pot like this, and around it we have plants, and then we have plants around, so that they benefit from the release of water around this area. This method, you can also use a plastic container or a container, bury it into the ground, and then you put some small holes, and when you put holes, then the water releases slowly into the ground. You just put water on top. Remember to close here so that mosquitoes are not breeding in the container. You can have these pits like in the field, where after every rain you collect this water, and then you allow the water to seep slowly into the ground. Eventually these containers, the pit beds, can save and direct water to the plants. We can build dams, it's override on top of the other. But it's about catching and storing water. This is a tank which is getting water from the roof, and then water comes in here, and we have a small hole here that allow water to go out, and when this water goes out, it goes into this tank, and from this tank you can see this pipe here. From this tank the water goes to this tank, and then it goes irrigate the garden. That's why this garden is green. It's the water that we receive from the rain, and the density of these plants eventually reduces the evaporation of water, allowing water to go down in the soil through its roots, and then support the system in the area or in your garden. This tank can be built in this method of ferro cement tank, where you use wire. You can see wire here, and then grid wire, and then fence and plaster inside out, 4 centimeter. Then we have a tank that can store water and can be used in the garden anytime when you need to irrigate, rather than waiting from the rain. The water, we can develop swells, and you can see at a bigger scale, we develop swell with a tractor. See, building swells. These are swells. These are ridges along the contour line. Like this, these are ridges around the contour line. And these ridges around the contour line, they are trapping water that runs from here into here and from here to there. And on the ridge, we plant trees. or you just plow crops here. Eventually, you have lots of water that is trapped in the ridges, in the contour ridges, or in the soil, and then this water supports the production of crops in here. In dry areas, you can grow or save water through this, and if you don't get rain in a period of 2 weeks or 4 weeks, you still have moisture in the ground because this water has been trapped to sit and slowly filtered into the soil. The process, it's all about also making different techniques in developing this. For example, here we have ridges. So you can have ridges in the field, and then you can close these ridges, and then you call them tie ridges. So that water, if you receive water, water sits here. And you can see here, water sits in the ridges, between the ridges, and allow the water to infiltrate in the soil. Then the production of maize, production of crops or trees in the area is improved. And when this is improved, then you have better production in the system. So it is about you designing your own farm, making sure that the water is collected. And in terms of irrigation, in saving water, there are different types of irrigation, like overhead irrigation, like the flood irrigation. But the drip irrigation system is the only way that you can use, best way to use for water harvesting, water management system. It is a means of trapping water, forcing water in the ground, and allow the water to infiltrate in the soil. And when this happens, then it helps in a system that is good to trap water and to allow water to go into the ground. So drip irrigation goes into the system and goes into the water direct into the ground. So at the end of the day, we are talking about developing a good system of garden that actually produce good vegetables through a better way of conserving water. And when you have a good effective water management, you can actually produce what you need, the diversity that you require. And I'd like to thank you, and I'm sorry about the chaos that is here because of I'm at a child center where we are trying to develop food gardens, and but the children are here and they sort of disturb the processes. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, John, for that input. I'm going to hand over straight to Ferial for your input, and then, as I said, afterwards we'll take some questions. So please, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. Ferial, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to share my screen quickly. Okay. Jane, can you see this first slide? Is my screen being shared?
No, not yet.
Okay, hold on.
Okay. Okay, something's happening. There we go.
All right,
I can see it.
Okay, great. So thank you for the, I think John's input was really, it actually links very nicely to what we've been doing as COPAC. So we produced this document, the Power for Water Sovereignty, People's Power for Water Sovereignty, about 2018, 19, I can't remember. And the idea, it stems from the extreme drought we were experiencing as a country, and we were looking at how can we give people the tools that they need on the ground when in terms of food sovereignty, because that's where it really stemmed from. And so we set out to develop this activist guide. Now, what I'm going to do is these guides are all available on our website, and Jane will give you the link to that website. But I'm also just going to tell you more, basically, very quickly, what this activist guide is about. So the aim of the guide was to empower ourselves. That was, the key thing, to empower ourselves with knowledge, to challenge the existing systems, and to encourage, activists on the ground and movements on the ground to engage on issues around water and people science, something we call people science. We think that this guide can be used to democratize knowledge. I think that when we, make knowledge easily accessible, it's spread out, that people have access to it, become empowered by it, and can have more say around issues around information and science. So we're hoping that this could influence people to become water justice activists as well. I've got CJC, which is the Climate Justice Charter, but just to say that when we started out with the water guide, we were talking about a water justice charter. And then we realized that actually climate justice is a bigger issue, and that water should fit into the Climate Justice Charter. So if any of you probably know of COPAC, you'd know that we've been working on the Climate Justice Charter. So that's how it links to all the other work that we're doing. In terms of the guide's contents, it's written as simply as possible. And watching John's presentation, there are some very similar elements in this guide. So we have a glossary that just defines certain terms like just transition, people science, those kind of things. It provides an introduction of why this guide is useful, who should use it, how they should use it, and how to use the guide. Often we develop tools and we develop activist guides without any explanation of how to facilitate this, how to organize around this guide, and how to share this information, have workshops within your areas, and how to build that knowledge. That's often not given. So in this guide, as you will find in all COPAC's guides, we give a basic kind of how to use the guide and a facilitation note, how to use, how to be facilitators, how to be good facilitators, what to do, questions to ask. Another thing that this guide does is throughout the guide, it has exercises. So you can, use them to have them as icebreakers or just fun activities if you are running workshops. And then it goes into the science of things. So it goes into the threat of climate change, which is very real. And it talks about climate change. It talks about the drought. It talks about the impacts of climate change in South Africa. And then often, we talk about water, but we don't talk about the science of water. So the module 4 is understanding water science. And John talked a bit about it, talking about the water cycle. But what I loved about John's presentation is that it was so nicely linking the practical part of having your food garden with the science, of the water cycle, why a water cycle is important, how to collect the water, all of that. And so we have a section which is understanding water science, and I'll give more information as we go through. And then we talk about the health of water, the water politics, because water is not just environmental, it's not just about farming, it's about decisions that governments make, that decisions and that industries influence on who has water, who controls the water, and that's politics. And then, of course, we have the module 7, which is people science for water justice. And then module 8 is a just transition pathway to water sovereignty. I will talk a little bit about each of these now. So how to use the guide, it gives you the purpose of the guide, it gives you the key principles for process facilitation and what it means to be a water justice facilitator. It also gives basic guidelines for the workshop, how to get organized, how to prepare the workshop, and I think those are good things. If you haven't done it before, these help you in terms of guiding you through.
We seem to have lost Ferial for a bit. I'm just going to try get in touch with her.
Exercise.
Ferial?
Yeah?
Okay, we just lost you for a bit, but you're back, so you can keep going.
Okay, sorry,
Go for it.
keep letting me know because the connection here is not so great, right?
Sure.
So I was saying that this is an example of an exercise that you will find throughout the guide. In each of the modules, you'll get different exercises. Some are more technical, some are about activism, but this one is the beginning one, it's the starting one. It's like, you know, when you have a workshop, it's about getting to know you kind of exercise. So it's just simple. Why are people attending the workshop? It kind of breaks the ice, but it also kind of gives you an idea of the people in the room and what people expect from the workshop, which is very important sometimes in how we run workshops. In terms of climate change, and I think that, you know, if you've been part of COPEC's other workshops, you'd know that climate change, we have had what is climate change, what is causing climate change, how will this change the world, what will the impacts be in South Africa, what we can do about it. And we write it in very simple language so that people understand. Because often when you talk about climate change, it just seems like science that is beyond the reach of ordinary people. So that's what we try to do in this guide. And then understanding water science. I've put a little, the graphic is there from the guide. So a nice thing about the guide is there's a lot of graphics that help you understand terminology, concepts. So this, for example, is a picture of the water cycle. And understanding water science, we talk about the explanation of key terms used to describe the water cycle, like precipitation, infiltration. We explain the water cycle. We also look at, you know, geography, like rivers, dams, groundwater, because water is not all the same. We look at the rainfall picture for South Africa. How is our water being allocated? And why is the science of water important to understand? So we start with a very big picture and then we bring it down into a South African picture, right? We talk about the water politics. This is also another example of the graphics you'll find, which, you know, kind of, it's different to your bar graphs. It's more exciting. It's nicer to use. And this is talking about access to water. You can have a look at that, but who makes the decision? So this section also deals with who makes the decisions on water. You know, we know that in the Constitution, government is supposed to act as a, you know, to look out for our water for people, to take care of the water for us. But who's really making the decisions? And that's something we talk about. The key policies, because government has some really good policies on water. So we cover some of those policies, what they each say and how are they relevant, and then how government's changing the good policies as well, because, you know, they might have a policy on water, but then they might also have a policy to push coal mining, for example, which uses a lot of water, and how they're moving towards privatization of water. So it's privatization in a different sense. So what they will do is they will hand out water licenses to like mining companies, big farms, and generally then that water is off limits to communities. They can't get access to it. And so small farmers can't really get enough water for their farms. And they're the first ones to suffer compared to the commercial farmers, right? And then we talk about people's science for water justice. Now, people's science is something which is exactly, John's presentation was exactly that, was how people who are farmers, fishers, you know, people on the ground, activists who are using science in different ways around their work. And so in this section, we talk about 10 suggested activities that people and communities can undertake to and be empowered. So like using local knowledge, using lived experience, like if you look at John's explanations of a lot of how to farm, what to use, and that comes with his experiences, right? And then some of it would be indigenous and traditional knowledge. Like we know that there's a lot of knowledge that's dying off and we need to reinvigorate it, because I think it can be very useful on how we monitor our environments. And then of course there are innovative ideas, and again, John's presentation was clear on how to collect water, how to save water in areas that you need to, using the different techniques that he talked about. The clay pots, the cloths, all of that is innovative ideas. I think sometimes when we talk of innovation, we always think technology and cell phones, but I think that there's other forms of ideas that can be useful on the ground. We don't always need technical responses. And then there are many organizations that are doing work on water in South Africa, and the guide also gives you a list of some of those organizations and of ordinary people involved in science. So then we get to the last section, which is the just transition pathway to water sovereignty. And in that we talk, so like I said to you, we talked about we first talked about a people's water charter, and now that has been changed to be a much bigger, more inclusive process, which is the climate justice charter. And we've identified 5 key pathways to water justice, which is food sovereignty. And I think that John's presentation is very much part of that. Indigenous knowledge, recognition of Indigenous knowledge, using people's science to take back the commons, and then of course the climate justice charter. Those were the 5 key pathways that we recognized or identified within the guide. So that is it. I'm going to stop sharing, but I just want to say something, is that the whole idea of this presentation or this guide was really to assist people with, because sometimes it feels like we need experts and we need people outside to come and help us with the kind of challenges we have, when actually we have a lot, as activists, we have a lot of that information at hand. It's how we use it. And so this activist guide takes all of that kind of knowledge that we have and says, okay, we've got this. Now let's package it, share it with the broader community, and then put it into action. And that is what this whole activist guide is about, and is very linked to climate justice charter and the way we're working on food sovereignty. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Ferial. So Ferial is an expert in water issues, and she's doing a PhD currently on people science and water. So Ferial, thank you for taking the time to share with us, and to share all of this knowledge that you have, but also for introducing the guide to us. So I see there are a few questions, and if you have questions for John or for Ferial, please write them in the chat. I think we'll go ahead and take the first one. So John, are you there? If you could unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm available.
Okay.
Yes.
Great, thanks, John. So the first question, and this is what you covered in our first series, but I think it would be good if you could answer it again. Please, could you tell us how we can create a blanket to rejuvenate the ground?
Yeah, exactly. I explained it earlier in other series, but the most important thing here is about looking at the ground, the soil. Do you see the soil in your garden? If you see it, how do you cover? What do you use to cover that? So organic matter, things that can decompose, are the major things that you can use for covering the blanket of the ground. And also the dry matter in terms of leaves, in terms of grass, can be used to cover the ground to put the blanket. Also
green manure cover crops like lima bean, like dolichos lablab, like cowpeas, like pumpkin. The green manure cover crops, it's mainly legumes, but also there are other crops that creeps that cover the ground, like pumpkin, butternut, sweet potato. All these are blankets for the soil. So you select from that and then practice the technology.
Great, thank you, John. I hope that answers your question, Andre. We have another question here from Yanni Pretorius. Can you recommend resources on how to set up a drip irrigation system from a rainwater tank? And then also maybe suggestions on how to automate the system in case she forgets to put it on or off. Did you get that?
The rainwater system tanks, ukuvuna as a team or as the expertise in developing or building water tanks of any type you wish, as long as it's not plastic tanks. But also setting up irrigation like drip line irrigation. There is an organization called Netfin. It's an Israel-based organization, but it's here in South Africa. It provides the right drip irrigation systems, and then it also the timing. It can set up the timing so that when you are away in other business, the irrigation can do it on its own. So, and there are several also local organization, South African-based organization that also help with that. So probably Googling around and checking, and you'll find some organization that can help. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then we've got another question. Can you recommend any innovative guttering solutions to catch rainwater from roofs?
The gutters, we usually use the common gutters that we buy from the hardwares, and these gutters are in form of plastics. Sometimes it's the corrugated iron sheets or the this one, the fiberglass gutters that we can use to catch water into the garden. But also depends how big is the building is, how much area do you want to catch the water. So then maybe the cheapest will be the corrugated iron sheet gutters that can be used in catching water. Yeah. In some areas you can use bamboo as a biodegradable thing. Bamboo can also catch water and direct water to where you want to use it or into a container. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I see there's no more questions at the moment. We've still got some time, so if you have some questions, please write them in the chat. But in the meantime, John, I have a question about drip irrigation versus sprinklers versus watering by hand. What would you recommend?
Watering, one, I can start by watering by hand. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of it's a lot of manual work. And sometimes when you pull the hose pipe, it affects the other crops. And if even you are using a watering can, it's heavy to carry it from one point to another. So it's quite a lot of work. The drip irrigation, it actually takes water to the plant and direct water direct into the soil. There's minimum evaporation that takes place when you are using drip irrigation. The overhead irrigation or sprinkler irrigation, it has a disadvantage that when the water is in the air, it can also evaporate at the same time before it drops on the ground. And when you use that, especially on tomatoes, it can also increase the diseases like bacteria and viruses, funguses into the plants like tomatoes and other plants that do not need water on the leaves. So the drip irrigation is the best one because it goes direct to the soil, and the roots through hydrotropism, they follow the system, they follow the water down to the ground.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. So I see there are no more questions. We can wait a bit for more questions to come in. Please, if you have any questions, this is your chance. And also if you have any questions for Ferial on the water situation in South Africa. In the meantime, John, do you have anything to add after watching your own presentation? Anything else you'd like to add about water management in our gardens? Any more tips?
Yeah, I just want to add that maybe if you do not have a container and we have water running on the surface, you need to increase pit beds. And the pit beds are a system that you dig maybe 70 centimeter by 70 centimeter by 70 centimeter deep, and you trap water into that pit bed, and it is full of organic matter. And then the organic matter decompose from the water you trap, you plant plants around the pit bed, not right in the pit bed, but around it, so that the plants will send roots into the pit bed. And eventually water will come in, runoff water, and then it's forced to go to the ground to support the underground water table. And that minimizes the spread or the allowing water to run on the surface.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So we have two more questions. So the first one, does grey water need to be filtered before use in the garden?
Yeah, definitely. Grey water system, even black water, you need to filter it so that it doesn't go right on the surface or it goes to the garden, because it carries pathogens or chemicals from the soap. It carries also, yeah, the chemicals from or grease from the kitchen. So you need to filter the grease first with sand bags or with sand containers or gravel, and then it goes into another tank where you filter with plants like Papyrus, Jangas species. These are the water-loving plants, and even the iris and all the plants that can grow in water. And then from there, you filter it again. It goes where you promote the oxygenating so that other bacteria and other plant-loving, plants that love water grows there. Then you can use it in the garden. You can filter water, grey water, to a situation where it becomes pure water, and you can use it in the garden for trees, for vegetables, but not direct to the root vegetables, but to leaf vegetables and to fruit trees. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Cliff is asking, he says, we have a good garden in Alexandra and we don't have a reliable water supply. Currently, we take from nearby residents. How can we get a borehole?
I don't know how you can get a borehole, but the whole idea is now to scout around. And I think there are other people who can hear you now who might donate or will to support for a borehole. But even before you get a borehole, you need to manage the runoff or water you receive in the area. If we have a road closer by, you can even divert water, running water on the road and divert it to your garden and create underground water tank where you can create maybe 100,000 liters of water tank that you catch runoff water from the road and divert this water into this tank and you save it for use in the garden. So it's all about different technology to make sure that you harness runoff water or rainwater for your garden and for the future use in the garden. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, John. All very insightful and very useful. And I'm sure we've all learned a lot. Before we close, I'm just going to hand over to Ferial. Ferial, do you have anything to add? I know there weren't any questions addressed to you, but I just want to give you a chance to speak before we close off.
No, I think that it's all covered. And I really, really enjoyed John's presentation. I really think that it's a wealth of information. I hope we get more of those kind of workshops. So yes, I think it was great advice.
Great, thank you, Ferial. Okay, I see one last question has come in about how to develop an agroecological hub. And that is something that we as SAFC are working on. So I think the first step that you can do is to list your site on the Food Commons map. And then next year, we're going to roll out another series, hopefully, on how to set up a hub. We're also going to work on developing an activist guide. So speak to experts who have developed hubs in the country, look at what needs to go into a hub, and then we'll have some workshops with that guide. But in the meantime, please reach out to us and we'll see how we can assist you there. Okay, John, anything else to add before I close?
Yeah, nothing. Thank you very much. Yeah, we will see you in the next episode.
Great, thank you, John. Okay, so just a reminder, our next workshop takes place not next week, but the following week. And there we're looking at composting and waste management. We have recorded this. It was live on Facebook, so it will also be available there. And we will send this recording to everyone who's registered. And I think that is all. So we'll see you all in 2 weeks' time. Thanks again to John and to Ferial and to everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Jane. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.